I am so excited, I can hardly stand it. I've actually felt sick this morning. I am on my way to Thun Field, also known as Pierce County Airport, just south of Tacoma, Washington, close to Puyallup, Washington. And I've got an envelope with $14,800 in it. I'm 50 years old and I have wanted to fly for so long. I've thought about flying, dreamed about it for ages and ages and ages. And today, a fella is right now in the air flying a Luscombe 8E. That's a 1940s tail dragger up from Oregon, which, unless something goes terribly wrong, I'm going to purchase. And then in the coming months, I'm going to get my private pilot certificate in that airplane. And I can hardly stand it. I'm so excited. So, I'll be at the airport here in just a few minutes. He should arrive a few minutes after that. And I'll look at the plane, maybe get a ride in it. Probably should get a ride in it. But I've seen a lot of pictures, looked at the logbooks. Plane's got good history and it's been well maintained, so I'm real excited about it. And I think it's actually quite a good deal. So stay tuned for my flying adventures. This is where I'm going to be spending a lot of time, although it won't always have this nice a view. But you can trust me when I say that in the summertime, you're going to see a lot of Mount Rainier and a lot of the Cascade Mountains. In fact, I have a lot of good ideas for some really great videos, a series on the Cascade Mountains and the volcanoes there. So anyway, hopefully it all pans out. We will see. And I don't see my Luscombe yet, so I'm going to look around. So the guy that I was counting on being my instructor, his name is Gene Ensley, apparently is out with hip surgery and won't be back for maybe 3 weeks. I suppose I could wait. That's not too long. But I may see if I can find another instructor. There's another guy that's recommended who's a tail dragger instructor who's in the area. So I'll check on that, but that's disappointing. So I'm still waiting here for my Luscombe to arrive, or not mine quite yet, but my almost Luscombe. And it's pretty warm today, mid-September here in Washington State. But beautiful day for flying. A little bit of a breeze. I think that's looks like maybe a left crosswind for the people that are flying in here and landing. So, all right, gonna have to see about an instructor now. So I'm standing in front of my new airplane. This is a 1946 Luscombe 8E. It is, as you can see, a tail dragger, otherwise known as conventional gear airplane, as opposed to a tricycle gear where you've got a nose wheel like that Cessna right there, for example, and most modern planes. So I just bought this plane for $14,800, and I'm going to get my private pilot certificate in it. I've seen some people ask before, I think probably from Europe or other countries, how you buy an airplane in the US, and it's actually pretty simple. You exchange money for an airplane, you fill out a bill of sale, and you send that into the federal government. And that's the gist of it. Washington State, and this is probably different in different states, Washington State wants you to register the plane, and I'm in the process of that. And to get a tie down at the airport here, they want the registration, they want to copy the insurance, so I'm also working on getting insurance, and the broker talks to a bunch of different companies to get quotes, so I'm in the middle of that. And if an airplane goes by, you gotta look. If you love airplanes, you know what I'm talking about. So let me give you a quick tour of the plane and tell you a few of the things I want to do to it. It's in pretty good shape. The engine, I think, has about 1,300 hours on it. It's a Continental C85. And there's a couple different ways that airplane engines, they're designated. There's an A65, C85, C90, and a couple other ones, and that's horsepower. So this is C85, that's 85 horsepower. Other engines are designated in cubic inches, so like an O200, O320, O360, and so on and so forth, or IO360, those are fuel injected, but that's cubic inches. So this one is a C85, 85 horsepower. Let's just take a little tour here. Valve covers, these engines have overhead valves, and the cylinders and cylinder heads are, my understanding is they're semi-permanent. They're not like on a car where you pop the head off, then you pop the cylinder, or the cylinders in a car are typically part of the block. But anyway, so this is quite a bit different than that. We've got, let's see, well, here's one of the exhaust manifolds, and it runs through this thing, and this thing brings air in through this hole, and the air comes in through this and out through here, and there's a lever down here that opens and closes a valve that lets air come out of here into the cockpit. That's for cabin heat. So this just extracts heat from the exhaust. Here's the engine mount. It attaches here, here, and then two spots over there. Interestingly, it ties in to the center here. That's where it attaches to the fuselage on the top. And then here and on the other side are the bottom mount points. So three spots it attaches to the fuselage, and also where it attaches to the fuselage, you've got these steel bars that come down from the wing roots down to where that engine mount is. So that just helps tie things together. Down here you've got the generator that provides power for the instruments and to recharge the battery in flight. This up here is the starter. And those two things are pretty heavy. And this is a 35 amp generator. Two owners before me, I think it was. Two owners before me was going to put in a full IFR panel. And so he bought a 35 amp generator. I think I can get a generator that'll save me about 5 pounds, and I can get a lighter starter. And also, I think I can save about, 10 pounds or more on the battery. So those are some things I'd like to do to lighten this thing up, because it's, according to the weight and balance, it's 950 pounds empty, which is pretty fat for a Luscombe. All right, here's one of the Magnetos. Each cylinder has 2 spark plugs, and this Magneto provides the spark to one set of spark plugs, and there's one right there on the other side that provides the spark to the other set of spark plugs, and that's for redundancy, and it also helps the fuel air mixture burn more thoroughly. Down in the bottom there, you can see that glass gizmo right there. That's the fuel filter, and you use this to check for water in the fuel before each flight as part of the pre-flight. So fuel from either tank ends up coming to this before getting fed to the carburetor, which is actually it's just right here. So then here's the air intake for the carburetor, comes in right here. This is an alternate air source for the carb. If this gets ice on it, you switch to this, so you can continue to get airflow to the carburetor. Let's walk around to the other side. So there's the filter, or the filter for the air intake. And see this tube right here? Right there's a tube. That brings in air, and that comes down, well, here's that tube up here. And there's a flap on the inside of the firewall, and that's for fresh air, that's for cool air. And you saw a muff like this on the other side over the exhaust pipe. this gets air from this side, just like the one over here. Gets air here, and it comes in here and gets heated, and you can pull a lever, and you see that other orange tube down there? That'll pipe that hot air into the carburetor. At low throttle settings, the venturi is closed, so that creates low pressure, so it cools off the air quite a lot, and ice can form in the carburetor. So sometimes you'll pull that lever and you'll pipe this hot air into the carburetor to get rid of ice that might be forming. So that's why you've got a muff on this side. And this cool air for the interior, for the cabin, that has a flat sort of valve on the inside of the firewall. The valve for the cabin heat, that's a valve that opens on the engine compartment side of the firewall. All right, here's the oil tank, and it's just a completely separate tank bolted onto the engine. This is the oil pressure relief valve. Here is the other magneto for the second set of spark plugs for each cylinder. What else? I think those are the highlights. Oh, this engine apparently is known for leaking oil out of the push rod covers, and so this has had, I guess they're called no leak covers installed, and you can see that spring there that adds tension to help it stay sealed up. So that's been done, so I shouldn't have leaks. Looks like this is probably an exhaust gas temperature sensor or probe, and that'll feed into the cabin to an instrument to help you see exhaust gas temperature. And there's still things I need to learn about this engine. There's some things I want to investigate. I want to see if there's a hole on each cylinder for cylinder head temperature. It would be nice if there is. I don't know if there will be, but I'll do some investigating when I'm not boring you guys with my hunt. All right, so that is the engine, and that's mostly what I know about it. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Where did it go? I think it's this guy right here. There's an oil screen in there, and that's how you that's where you, when you change the oil, you have to disassemble this thing to check that screen for debris. And it's actually a pretty coarse screen, and it only catches larger particles. Some folks will put on an attachment, and I think it just bolts on here in lieu of this, and an oil filter then can spin onto that. It sticks out this way. Another one bolts on something here, and hoses come to a remote mount point here, and you've got a vertically mounted filter that you can screw on and off. That's what I would like to get installed on this thing. I don't want to dread oil changes. Unfortunately, everything for airplanes is expensive, so that would be, I think the kit is $600. I can live with that, and then I imagine it's a bunch more for the installation. So anywho, pain in the neck it looks like to do an oil change on this thing. And then you would just drain the oil tank. And I'm not exactly sure how that mechanism right there works, but that's what I'd need to fiddle with to drain the oil. All right, that's the engine compartment. Let's take a look at the airframe a little bit. You can see there's no flaps here. Ailerons, you got the push-pull here. And this upper cable just goes straight across the upper front of the cabin, straight across to the other wing. That cable comes in and you probably can't see it too well, but that cable is right there and just goes straight across to the other side, to the other aileron. Looks like maybe a flying lesson here, and they're doing a pre-flight. Stopping right there and going over some things. And I gotta tell you, I'm pretty excited about that being me. Anyway, so the one aileron cable, the top one, just comes in from the wing into the cabin, across, over the other aileron. The other cable comes down here and then down under the stick there. And that's basically how those are hooked up. You got two sets of rudder pedals, of course. Now the Luscombe has heel brakes. Now typically in a Cessna or most other airplanes on the face of the earth, you've got toe brakes. The brakes are up on top above the rudder pedals. Here you use your heels, so that'll be interesting. All right, passenger door. This is how you lock that. That's locked, so you can't move this. This way lets you. And obviously you can't just slam these doors, because this would just bang into the frame here. So you've got to pull that lever down and close the door, then let go. Brakes, cable actuated. These are those activated by the heel brakes, or actuated by the heel brakes. And I'm pretty sure these are drum brakes. The ones I've seen with discs, the discs are visible. So those are the brakes. You just step on this to climb into the cockpit. It's a little bit tough to get in, but I'm trying to lose weight and get in shape, so we'll see how that goes. Here's the panel. And you've got some really old instruments. Hobbs meter, amps, so it tells you if your battery's charging. And I showed you that exhaust probe in there. That would feed into this instrument. VSI, vertical speed indicator. Oil temp, oil pressure, RPM, altimeter there, and airspeed. And then we got a radio and an old-fashioned transponder there. Master switch over there. And the seller had a Garmin 296, I think, mounted here. And that's what it sounds like when the engine's idling. I want to learn to fly, I think, with just paper and old school navigation. So I think I'm just going to take this ugly thing out for the time being. And eventually I'll use my phone and an iPad. Actually, I want to redo the whole panel. So at the end of the year, I'm hoping to do that, because I'll need an ADS-B anyway. So, and I only want a few simple instruments, but all electronic, so the panel will be much, much cleaner and simpler. That's my hope. So besides those lighter weight components I mentioned before, the battery, the starter, and the generator, I want a new panel. And at some point, I'd like to do an O200 conversion on the engine. So the O200 conversion is where you take an O200 crank, and the O200, that's the 200 cubic inch engine that produces 100 horsepower. You take a O200 crank, rods and pistons, and I think valve springs, put them into this engine, and you get 107 horsepower instead of 85. So that's a huge jump in horsepower, 25% or so. So that's something I'd like to do. Those are really the only things I want to do to this plane, or the main things anyway. I'd also like to get slightly bigger tires, not a lot bigger, but a little bit bigger, and a bigger tail wheel, because I'd like to fly into some grass strips, and some of those are a little bit rough. Washington has, the Department of Transportation takes care of a bunch of grass strips across the state, and I'd really love to fly into those. So bigger tires will help. Speaking of tires then, let's take a look at the tail wheel. There's the tail wheel. You can see it got turned around when they pushed the plane into the spot here, but it'll swivel back this way. So it's kind of a small tail wheel. I think it's about 5.5 inches. So a Scott 3200 is 8 inches. So that along with slightly larger main tires will smooth things out some. Here's the trim tab on the elevator. That's the only trim control this plane has. Actually, let me walk back up and show that to you. It's between the seats here. You can see that tells you how far nose down or nose up you're trimmed. And it's this control right here that you turn. And you can see that thing move as you turn it, in case you need a visual reference regarding your up or down trim. And I may take that apart, take this cover off just to clean that up a little bit. One of the things I'm doing initially here is just a little bit of cleanup on the airplane, vacuuming and so forth. Oh, another project that I'm going to do has to do with these seats. So they don't look too bad, but as you might be able to tell, this seat is lower than this one. 2 owners ago, he was a big guy, and he got this cushion shortened, and it's too short for me. And I also need to be scooted forward a little bit. It's pretty common to get, there's a bee buzzing around my head. It's common for pilots that are small to get a back cushion here, so they're scooted forward more. I also need to come up higher than this big guy needed to. So I took some measurements, and this is a good height, although this cushion is really, really heavy for some reason. I don't know why. And this one's too short, and I need a back cushion. So I'm gonna have these 3 seats reupholstered. So I'm gonna head to the upholsterer. I have an appointment at 1 o'clock today, and we'll talk about that and the colors I want. Now there's some red highlights you may have noticed. It's not a ton of things, but I'm planning on making it blue. Will be the main color. I think I'll leave the fuselage aluminum and maybe get the stripe that Luscombes traditionally have with the S on the cowling, which is for Silver. That's part of the model designation for Luscombes, Luscombe 8 Silver. So there's traditionally a stripe on the side or a couple stripes with the S on the cowling, and I'd like to do that, but that'll be in blue. That's my idea. And then the few things on this plane that are red, I'll just make those blue. That's my idea. So, I guess there's some other things in the panel, but nothing too exciting. There's the key, left mag, right mag, both. Carb heat, landing lights, nav lights. This panel is a real hodgepodge, and in my opinion, it's a mess. And I think it looks pretty horrendous. And then you got your throttle starter, and I'd never seen one of these. Check this out. You pull this out, it's spring loaded, and when you pull it out all the way, right there, it engages the starter motor. That's kind of cool. So the key doesn't do that. This is your spring loaded gizmo that starts the engine. And then mixture control, but you do not have good granular control with this mixture control. So I'd like to put in a vernier knob for mixture. And then cabin heat, and then cabin air. And I told you about those. Let me show you those. So there's the cabin air. This is the one that's on the right side. And it just rotates and opens that up so that air gets forced in from the outside, from that right-hand front of the cowling. And this is the heat that has the valve that I mentioned on the left side that's inside the engine compartment, and that just is a flapper. So those, for some reason, have different mechanisms. I don't know why. And this firewall is kind of an ugly mess. I want to clean that up, get some paint remover on there, and and clean that up. So I have some paint remover with me. I'm gonna work on a few different bits of the plane. Let me show you the underside of the right wing. So if you look under the right wing, so this is aluminum, right? So this is not rust. Aluminum doesn't rust. So this, I believe, is paint from its previous life. And you know, there's just little bits of paint here. So I'm gonna try to clean that up today. I got some paint remover and some brushes and rags. I'll see if I can clean that up. And yeah, there's some remnants on the aluminum. The aluminum mostly is quite clean, but there's some spots here that maybe I'll put some paint remover on, and I got some Scotch-Brite just to try to clean up a few spots. And this felt on the engine cowling, this is almost totally gone. I want to replace that. That's something I want to try to do today. And the doors here have a latch, or actually I don't even know what you'd call that. Not really a latch, maybe a kind of latch. And that's a little bit sticky. I brought a little grease. I'm gonna put some grease on there. Just, that bugs me how that's kind of too much friction on there. It's almost like sandpaper. Well, this is fun. So Luscombe's originally came with glove boxes. You open this up, it's not really a glove box. There's a couple of breakers. And it's funny, these old planes, these breakers like your house has. So that's kind of funny. This seat just pivots forward, and it also pops out real easily. And these just lift out. You just yank up on them and they pop out. I'll show you that in a minute. And this seat tilts forward just against these cushions. So you just pull on that, and you've got some baggage here. Put your backpack in there, or your suitcase for your trip. And you can put stuff here too. One thing I'm gonna do as well, this thing's parked outside and it's moist here in the winter time in the Pacific Northwest. I'm gonna remove some of this fabric in here. When I was here last weekend, this was wet. This was wet. Check this out. That's a freaking sponge, basically. I posted that on the Luscombe Facebook page, and people were laughing and added the wow icon, because that's just gonna collect and hold moisture, and then you're gonna get corrosion. So I want to get rid of some of this fabric in here that's just gonna hold moisture. And also, there apparently used to be, well, the previous owner said he thought maybe a beacon was mounted here on top of the fuselage. This is pretty terrible looking. It's just Bondo. So I want to look at that and actually maybe repair it with aluminum, and this needs to come out for that. And besides, this just looks like total crap. So I'm gonna get this out. Unfortunately, what you need to do is remove these two bolts, because they're holding this thing in. So I'm gonna need to cut this safety wire. I'll buy a safety wire pliers, one or two sets of different size safety wire pliers, and I've got some safety wire. I'll get more safety wire because that's just something you need if you're gonna do any work on airplanes. Take these out, get this out, and I'll make something different for this, and that'll also allow me to look back into the upper part of the fuselage and see that patch. So I'll take these out today just so I can take a look back there. I won't try to patch that up today, but at some point I'd like to get a nice aluminum patch in there because that looks terrible. So that's my plane, and I'm pretty excited about it. Actually, I'm so excited I can hardly stand it, and I'm gonna start lessons. Oh, my CFI had hip surgery recently, or the guy that I intend on having as my CFI. He's an old timer, which I think is super cool. That's just what I wanted. He had hip surgery recently, and in maybe 3 weeks from now, he'll be ready to get back in the air. So I am excited. Just trying to clean the plane up a little bit before then. And hopefully I can show you some videos as I learn to fly. All right, so these are the screws that I removed, 4 from each side. There's a long one, and the rest look the same. I removed those from these holes right here. What's interesting, I also, actually, if you come back to the tail, you'll see there's no screw there or there. There's a giant one there, and no screw there or there or there. So, and bigger ones here and here too. And the guy that I bought the plane from said that that happens over time. These holes get stripped out and the screws don't bite, so you got to put bigger and bigger ones in. And when I tried to get these 2 out, they just spun. As I used my drill here to unscrew them, it just spun. It didn't come out, so I had to apply some force to try to pull up on this a little bit, and then it finally came out. So that's something I'll need to deal with on the plane. Either put some kind of backer behind there for the screws to bite into, or the way everyone else does it, just put bigger screws in. But I don't think that's a real nice solution. Anyway, looks like I need to take one more screw off here, and then I think I need to take this handle off. Well, or take these 3 screws out, and then I can just leave the handle. That's what I'll do. And then this should pop right off then. All right, took these 3 screws off, so now I don't need to worry about taking this off. Well, I probably would need to take those 3 out anyway. And then I took this one out. All right, let's see what's under here. Woo! All right, that is the deal right there. It's kind of dirty. I'll clean it off. There's the indicator. So let's see what happens when we turn this thing. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see it. There's a lead screw in there. I think the view will be better on the other side. I'll take a look at that. Lead screw, and there's a nut on the lead screw, and this screw basically attaches this wire to that nut. So when I turn the lead screw, it moves this nut, which moves this wire then, and this looks like a single wire going around this little pulley, and this one wire then goes back to the trim tab on the elevator. So that's how that works. Cool, I did not know. Let's go around to the other side and take a better look at that lead screw. Yeah, it's dirty. I'll clean that up. And there's the lead screw. And looks like maybe just some C-clips in there holding that in place. Because if you didn't have those, then this lead screw would tend to just move back and forth if there's enough resistance in the system. So there's how that works. And you can kind of see down in here. Let's see here. I don't know if you see anything moving there. And that's elevator. So that's where the seats go. The main seats go, just get squeezed between that and that. And the rear seat, one pin goes in here, one pin goes in a hole right over there, the same hole. And that reveals this. Let me just pop this off of here for you to see back there. Oops. Oh, there's the emergency what's that, ELT, emergency locator transmitter. If you crash, inertia activates that. Oh, in fact, that piece of brass there, I guess that's your inertia. It flips that little white switch and transmits your location. That light colored tube there, that's the static pitot source. That comes just on the side of the plane. There's a little hole, and that comes forward there, that tube, and feeds into a couple of the instruments. You can see here pulleys for the ailerons. That's the lower pulleys. And it's interesting how much movement side to side you get on that thing. Depending if you're full right, it's lined up on this side, but it's out of whack on that side, and vice versa. Out of whack on this side when you're full left. So that's interesting. Anyway. Oh, let's look back here. So there's the battery. There's all the control cables and an overflow tube going out the bottom of the fuselage for the battery. And there is, looking back into the fuselage, got your pair of cables for the rudder and a pair of cables for the elevator, and then the trim tab cables are the small set of cables off to the right there. And you can see the pull handle. That was a nice, actually, so two nice features this plane came with was the shoulder harnesses. That's an aftermarket option. That's really nice. If you crash, at least if you die, it won't be from smashing your face on the control panel. Anyway, that's a good safety feature, and that's real nice to have. And you can see it's an inertia reel on the pilot side, which allows you to move forward far enough to manipulate this fuel valve for the right-hand fuel tank. And by the way, this plane has two fuel tanks. One in the right wing, one in the left wing, 12.5 gallons each. And that pull handle you saw back in the fuselage, that's this thing right here. You just put your finger in and pull it out. It lets you pick up the tail of the airplane to move the plane around. A lot of people throughout history, they've used the elevator on the Luscombe to pick it up and move the tail, and it damages the horizontal stabilizer rather, and it damages that component. So that pull handle is really nice. Another thing I wanted to do that I forgot to mention is just to clean up this foam seal along the edge of the door. So there's the door, and you can see on the left side and then the bottom, it's got that foam, and it's coming apart there and there. So I just want to replace that with some fresh foam, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, so the wing has these access panels underneath, so you can inspect things like pulleys and the spar. And I'm going to see if I can stick this camera up in there and see something. Hard to get good light in there. So that's looking down towards the wingtip. And let's spin the camera around and look towards the fuselage. All right, I have no idea what's up in here. So this is facing the fuselage. Let's see if we can see the fuel tank, maybe. So there's the fuel tank through that rib there. And let's look forward, see if we can. There's the spar. That's the main spar. Oh, it looks really clean in there. That makes me pretty happy. And now let's keep turning around here, look toward the spar, but outboard, toward the wingtip. The wingtip's down there. Boy, it looks really good. So you can see this wing design. The original had complete ribs, but it was covered in fabric, so it needed complete ribs. This one just needs some reinforcement to maintain the wing shape, but you can see it doesn't have complete ribs except in a couple spots. Let's look toward the rear. Let's see the aileron is down there, so we're just looking at the rear spar here. There's the rear spar. Well, it all looks in really good shape. I'm happy about that. Here, actually, we're not seeing as much. This is just the pulleys. So the control cables come from the aileron, or the stick inside the cockpit, and the cable, the forces turn 90 degrees here via these pulleys. So that's important to be able to inspect that. And then the cable comes out there, and then up on top of the wing. Well, let's go around the back. See here it hooks onto the aileron, and there's on top. So that's pretty easy to inspect from outside here. Anyway, so that inspection panel is just for those pulleys. And those are all the inspection panels. All right, now here's in the cockpit. I got my handheld radio hanging from the pitot tube just so I can hear what's going on. So these seats just pop out. I got these two cushions, and then I got the seat back right there on the ground. And the upholsterer wanted $6,000 to reupholster those. The plane cost $14,800. $6,000. So I bought some leather myself and the foam, and I'm gonna have a friend sew it. And it should cost, I don't know, maybe $1,500. Anyways, so these seats just pop out. They just lift out, and then you just pop them back in. The back one here, there's a pin on one side, right there. You slip that into one hole, and then you got this spring gizmo on the other side. You just pull that lever, and this pin goes in the other side. I'm gonna make a template. Oh, I got my Seahawks cushions that my wife made for me. And this was pretty ugly before. This was covered, but it was ugly. And I'm gonna make a template out of this poster board. And I'm gonna cut just a piece of 1/8 inch plywood, which I'll stain and put there instead. We'll see how that looks, I don't know. But it couldn't be worse than what was there before. And you can see down into the fuselage there. And I painted these covers of the wing root there. That's the one on the right side. It had fabric before, and it was holding moisture, which you don't want to hold moisture next to aluminum or any metal because it'll corrode. And then there's the trim cover. I painted that. It looks really nice, and painted the indicator there, and then painted that cover right there. Covers the rudder cables. Painted that the same blue. Made this gust lock. Painted that the same blue, which doesn't really matter. So little by little, I'm just tweaking things. There's my Seahawk seat covers, or cushions, just so I can get a little better view. So little by little, fixing things up. For example, all the screws in these metal panels, it's all new hardware, because a lot of the screw heads on this plane are stripped, or the holes they're screwed into are stripped, or the screw heads are stripped. And this was just a big blob of horrible Bondo. And so this is a repair that is far superior, much better. And that's it so far.